What if the man who first mapped our unconscious could sit down with us? Today, we have a time-traveling interview with none other than the father of psychoanalysis, Dr. Sigmund Freud. Freud will describe his method, the role of dreams, and he'll tell us about the urges and fears that our infantile self felt in regard to our parents, what he calls the Oedipus complex.
Shall we begin?
Today, Dr. Sigmund Freud. Dr. Freud, I come to you from the 21st century. I find you in your Vienna study in 1922. Welcome.
From the 21st century, you say? Well, time travel is not among the neuroses I have yet catalogued, but the mind is inexhaustible in its inventions. Very well, let us accept your premise, for fantasies often reveal more than literal truths.
Could you describe your background before you started your current practice?
I was born in Freiburg in Moravia, now a small, forgettable town, though at the time it was part of the Austrian Empire. My family moved to Vienna when I was still a child, and it is here that I have spent nearly all my entire life. I was from early on an eager student. Languages, literature, philosophy, all stimulated me. But science held the greatest promise. In those days, a Jewish boy with ambition learned to choose his professions carefully. Medicine offered both intellectual opportunity and a place in the world. I studied physiology and neurology under some of the great minds of the University of Vienna. My earliest work was purely anatomical, microscopic studies of the nervous system. I'd expected to pursue a scientific career, perhaps as a researcher in a university laboratory, but prospects for advancement were not generous for men of my background, and my desire for independence grew stronger. So I entered private practice as a physician. First, I treated neurological disorders in the conventional ways of the time, but I soon encountered symptoms that defied anatomical explanation. Hysterias, obsessions, paralyses without organic cause. These patients spoke a different language, one not found in textbooks. It was in trying to understand them that I turned toward psychology, toward the workings of the mind itself. My years in Paris with Charcot, my collaboration with Breuer, the case of Anna O, these experiences opened a path I had not yet foreseen. They forced me to confront the reality of the unconscious and to develop the method that has occupied me ever since.
Could you outline your psychoanalytic method for us?
Certainly. The method I have developed is, at its core, a way of allowing what is hidden in a person to reveal itself. Patients come to me burdened by symptoms they do not understand, anxieties, compulsions, strange inhibitions, or a persistent sadness that has no obvious cause. They imagine these things to have arisen suddenly, as if by accident, but nothing in the mind is accidental. There are motives and memories at work, though the patient may know nothing of them. My task is to help him approach these concealed forces. To do this, I ask the patient to recline, to relax his attention, and to speak whatever comes into his mind without censorship. Most people believe they can guide their thoughts as they guide their steps on a street, but this is an illusion. When a patient tries to follow every thread, no matter how foolish or embarrassing it seems, he soon discovers that the mind has its own subterranean pathways. It is along these paths that the truth of the neurosis lies. As the patient speaks, he also begins, inevitably, to invest me with feelings that do not properly belong to the present situation. He may treat me as a stern father, or as a cherished protector, or as a rival. These are echoes of earlier relationships, old conflicts, reborn in the present. Rather than dismissing these feelings, I encourage the patient to observe them, because in doing so he uncovers what he has been repeating, often for decades, without awareness. This is what we call transference. My own role is to listen with what I have called evenly suspended attention, not hunting for a particular detail, but receiving everything the patient offers. When the time is right, I offer interpretations, connections between the patient's present difficulties and the forgotten, often infantile wishes and fears that lie behind them. Such insight rarely arrives all at once. The patient must return to it again and again. In the end, what we aim for is not a miraculous cure, but a strengthening of the patient's ego so that he is less at the mercy of forces he does not understand. A person who knows something of his own unconscious life, who is less frightened of his own wishes, can live with greater freedom. It is a slow process. Yes, and at times a painful one, but I know of no better path for bringing the hidden truths of the mind into the light of consciousness.
I understand you also ask your patients about their dreams. How does that work?
Yes, dreams. I have long held that dreams are not meaningless phantoms of the night, but the royal road to the unconscious. They show us, more directly than anything in waking life, the wishes a person has repressed. When a patient reports a dream, I do not pretend to know its meaning simply by hearing the tale. The dream, as the patient remembers it, the manifest dream, is like a facade of a house. To understand what the dream truly expresses, we must go inside, and the key to the door is the patient's own associations. So I ask the patient to recount the dream in detail and then to take each element: the peculiar hat, the stranger's face, the inexplicable stairway, and say whatever comes to mind about it. These associations, not the dream image itself, show us the hidden wish or conflict that sought expression during sleep. The dream work, as I call it, disguises that wish through condensation, displacement, and other distortions so that the sleeper may remain asleep. The mind is clever in its defenses. The endless task is to follow these associations patiently until the underlying material reveals itself. Often what emerges is something infantile, a wish once felt strongly but later judged unacceptable, perhaps forbidden by the developing conscience. Awake, the ego keeps such material out of sight. Asleep, its vigilance softens and the wish slips through, though still in disguise. Dreams, therefore, do not predict the future, nor do they speak in symbols with fixed meanings like entries in some mystical dictionary. They are meaningful only in relation to the dreamer's own history. With careful attention, they uncover not only repressed wishes, but also the conflicts between the id, the ego, and that new element whose importance I am presently studying, the superego. So when a patient brings me a dream, I treat it not as a curiosity, but as a privileged moment when the mind has revealed, however cryptically, what it normally conceals. And very often, a single dream, properly analyzed, illuminates an entire chapter of the patient's life.
You are working on a book titled The Ego and the Id. Could you describe your model of the psyche for us?
You have seen the manuscript on my desk. Yes, I'm at work on the ego and the id, trying to clarify certain matters that have become unavoidable after decades of analytic experience. Since you ask, I shall try to describe the model as plainly as one can, though the psyche is not a simple machine with its parts neatly labeled. What we call the ego is, in truth, only a small island of consciousness rising out of a much larger sea. It prides itself on being rational, deliberate, master of its decisions. Yet again and again we discover that it is no such master. Behind it, beneath it, lies the id, a reservoir of instinctual drives and archaic wishes. The id does not reason, it does not judge, it does not consider consequences. It seeks discharge, immediate, blind, and powerful, as in the infant before he has learned anything of the world's refusals. The ego, then, is born out of the id, like a rider upon a wild horse. It must negotiate between the demands of instinct and the demands of reality. To do this, it develops defensives, perceptions, judgments, and above all, the capacity to delay gratification. But it is always in a precarious position, for the horse is stronger than the rider, and the rider's authority is borrowed, not inherent. And now we come to a third agency, one that has become clearer to me only in recent years. I call it the superego. It arises from the internalization of parental authority, of prohibitions, of the moral demands a child once experienced as coming from the outside. Eventually, these become lodged within him, forming a severe judge that watches over the ego. This superego may be rational and guiding, but it may also be harsh, punitive, even cruel, an heir to the child's earliest fears of punishment and loss of love. Thus you have three forces: the id pressing for instinctual satisfaction, the ego imposing ideals and prohibitions, and the ego trying to provide a workable balance between them while dealing with the external world. It is a conflict-ridden arrangement, and perhaps necessarily so. If you imagine the mind as a house, the ego is what inhabits the well-lit rooms. The id is the cellar where their ancestral passions continue their activity, and the superego is the stern overseer watching from the upper floor, ensuring that the house obeys certain rules, even when those rules are themselves inherited from a primitive past.
Please tell us about your concept of the Oedipal complex.
Ah, yes, the question that seems always to arise no matter what subject we begin with. What I call the Oedipus complex is not a doctrine I imposed upon the data, but a pattern that emerged again and again in the analytic treatment of both adults and children. It is, I believe, a universal drama of early development, though each individual lives it in his own way. In the early years, the child's first great attachments, and indeed his first loves, are directed toward the parents. These are not abstract affections, but passionate, bodily, jealous emotions. The little boy, for example, experiences his mother as his dearest object, the source of comfort and pleasure. He wishes to possess her entirely, and he discovers very soon that there is a rival for her attention, his father. Toward the father, he feels both admiration and hostility. Hostility because the father stands between him and what he desires, and admiration because he is the model of what the boy wishes to become. These feelings, of course, cannot be admitted openly. The child fears the father's retaliation, and in the boy, this fear crystallizes into what I have termed the castration anxiety, the dread that punishment for his forbidden wishes will take a bodily form. Under the force of this fear, the boy renounces his exclusive claim on the mother and begins to identify with the father instead. In doing so, he lays a foundation for the development of conscience and for the assumption of a masculine role. There's a parallel situation for the girl, though the dynamics are not identical. Her emotional life centers on her attachment to the father and her rivalry with the mother. The resolution of this conflict proceeds along different lines, and I admit that much remains to be clarified. Nevertheless, the essential pattern of love, jealousy, fear, and eventual identification seems to be present there as well. The crucial point is this: the Oedipal wishes do not vanish simply because they are repressed. They continue to influence the child's later life, shaping his choice of partners, his relation to authority, his moral character, even his neurotic symptoms. In psychoanalysis, we often find that adult conflicts are but elaborations of this early drama lived out on a grander stage.
Thank you, Dr. Freud.
You say you come from the future. How is my reputation doing 100 years hence?
The good news is that your talking cure has prospered enormously throughout the world. But your method of intense psychoanalysis with many sessions a week has nearly disappeared, and its animating philosophy has splintered. Yes, there is still a psychodynamic school that owes much to you, but cognitive, humanist, and many other flavors of therapy have sprung up. Also, on the plus side, you had a vast influence over 20th century artists and scholars. You've probably already heard of Salvador Dali.
Yes.
But there will be others, filmmakers like Alfred Hitchcock, actors like Laurence Olivier, authors like James Joyce, scholars like Harold Bloom. Your insights nourish their work deeply. However, the bad news is that your reputation has suffered among scientists who consider your work speculatory and unscientific. Over the last few decades, citations of your texts have dropped precipitously. Finally, the feminist movement that sprung up in the 70s will consider your views misogynistic and minimizing of their gender.
The idea of time travel is preposterous. Good day, sir.